In this lesson, we're talking about interpersonal relationships. So we'll talk about interpersonal communication, emotional intelligence, personal motivation for interpersonal contact, motives for interpersonal communication, how to talk to each other, self-disclosure, elements of good relationships, and the social exchange theory. So let's get a good definition of what interpersonal communication is. Interpersonal communication is one person interacting with another on a one-to-one basis. Very often that's in an informal, casual, unstructured setting. Emotional intelligence is important when you're using your interpersonal communication skills because it helps you understand and get along with other people. You have to be aware of yourself in order to be able to manage your conversations with other people. So emotional intelligence is the ability to understand and get along with others. It includes being self-aware, not just of the person that you're talking to, but being aware of your own emotions and your reactions. If you know that a particular thing makes you angry, maybe not bring that thing up as conversation, just being self-aware. Also managing your emotions. There's an appropriate time and place for all emotions, but knowing where and when to use those is a guiding force of emotional intelligence. Also, how to motivate yourself. Motivation is a hard thing, and some people are more motivated than others, but you have to want to understand people better and want to make these interpersonal relationships in order to make that happen. Also, being able to recognize all these emotions in others. So if you realize you're pushing someone's buttons, then emotional intelligence allows you to stop. It also allows you to revert to your strategic flexibility mode, where you start to assess the situation and reevaluate, where you think on your feet on how to get out of this situation that maybe you've talked yourself into. And it's also part of handling relationships in general. Again, strategic flexibility, we've talked about it in several different lessons now. So that's a clue that it's pretty important for you to know. Strategic flexibility, once again, is that perception, that emotional intelligence, and self-concept that helps you kind of get your foot out of your mouth, for lack of a more eloquent way to put it. And those steps are anticipating what could get me into a bad situation and assessing the situation. Oh, I've gotten into a bad situation. Now, what can I do to make a change? Then you evaluate, did that work? And would this work? Maybe something else would be better. Then you end up selecting the choice that you're going to use to get out of this situation, and then you apply it. And then you start all over again in that process if that one choice doesn't work. So we all have different motivations for interpersonal contact. I always think back to being a kid in the lunchroom, first grade in the lunchroom. Personal motivation for interpersonal contact was not to eat lunch alone. Or sometimes, if you were the kid who always asked for my peas, you wanted to sit by me because you knew I didn't want my peas. And so that was kind of, that was a tangible benefit from interpersonal contact during the lunch break for first grade me. But there are other reasons that people want to make interpersonal contact. Some of those factors include physical attraction. Now, it doesn't mean you have to be the prettiest, the best dressed. You don't have to be wearing designer clothing or anything like that, but just attention to detail. Are you clean? Are you smelly? Those things. Physical attraction can be a personal motivator. Also, totally, let's just take the cleanliness and hygiene part out of it altogether and think about maybe running into someone who was wearing a t-shirt with a favorite game of yours or a favorite movie reference or something like that on it, or even just a funny statement. Then that could physically attract you to that person. It lets you know that they have something in common with you right off the bat before you ever exchange words at all. Another reason for personal motivation for interpersonal contact is some sort of perceived gain. Again, that's the kid who liked the little green round peas, who always wanted to sit by me at lunch on the day that the little round peas were served, because I was not going to eat them and they wanted my peas. Perceived gain. Similarities, going back to the idea of the gamer shirts or the movie shirts, whatever that, quote might be that drew you to that person based on a similarity that you saw. Differences might also draw you to make contact with someone. So maybe a difference of opinion kind of gives you a new perspective, and that's interesting to you. Sometimes differences of culture will draw people together because people like to learn new things. So differences can also be a motivational reason for interpersonal contact. Also, proximity. Proximity is another aspect of interpersonal contact. Long distance relationships are not as difficult as they used to be, I think, because of things like FaceTime and Zoom and Skype and all of those ways that we're able to see and talk to each other now. But, it's tough to have a best friend in one place when you're somewhere else if you're in school. And so you might use that as a reason to find someone else to be your friend if your best friend moved away. So the reasons for interpersonal communication, well, there's pleasure, there's affection, inclusion, escape, relaxation, control, and health, for all the reasons that are pretty obvious. So pleasure, someone to have fun with. You might contact someone and make a new friend just by saying, hey, do you want to go get a Coke together? And then you build conversation and a friendship grows. Also, affection. People need affection and people thrive on affection. So the opportunity to find affection within a community. Inclusion, speaking of community, is also important. When you have someone that you can have interpersonal communication with, you have someone that you belong with. Also, escape, again, going back to pleasure, going to movies or just getting away or taking a road trip, riding the back roads, whatever it is you do. Also, relaxation is a motive for personal or interpersonal communication, like let's go hang out, let's go do yoga, let's go just chill, let's go for a spa day, whatever you do with your friends for relaxation. Health is another one. And, and the graphic here shows people riding bikes. It's just more fun to do that sort of activity with a friend. So that's another reason that interpersonal communication can actually have health as a motive. Control is when we get to a negative aspect. The idea of creating interpersonal communication to control someone is something you should really look deeper at. If you feel like that's happening, if you feel like you want to be friends with someone to control them, or you're in a relationship so you can control that person, it's not healthy for you, not healthy for them. So keep that in mind too. So the best way to start a conversation with someone that you don't know is through small talk. And it's called that because it's about unimportant topics. Never start with things like religion or politics right out of the gate. You're sure to step on somebody's toes and have to employ those strategic flexibility cues that we've been going over. But small talk is social conversation about unimportant topics. You can ask questions to find out information, to establish common ground, and it's just honestly to be sociable. I know this graphic is a little blurry, and I hope you can make the slides big enough to actually look through it, but this is a typical communication format in small talk that starts with a greeting. Hi. Doesn't have to be huge or difficult, just hi. And then an introduction. I'm whatever. How are you today? I mean, that's a health question, right? So you can look through this on your own, but it's kind of interesting that this really kind of hits it, whether we think about it or not. Again, most of our communication isn't something that we think about. It's something that we do intuitively. However, if you want to improve your communication style, you definitely can just by paying attention to these things and by employing some of these tips along the way. So what is a bid? A bid is an attempt to gain attention or to show willingness to communicate with a person. If you've ever been at the club and you've ever made eye contact with someone to let them know that you would love to dance with them, that's a bid. So to create bids or to recognize bids, look for people who are, one, looking at you. A smile is a bid usually. Also, like leaning towards someone or even pointing at someone could be a bid. So if you want to open the opportunity to have more bids, focus on the people around you instead of yourself. Let people know that you're interested in talking about them and set a positive tone in those conversations. Avoid being negative and harmful criticism, because remember, you don't know who these people are necessarily. And the one thing you're about to criticize, if you open your mouth to do so, may end up being the one thing that they're involved in or the one person that they know well. So don't do that. Also, create a climate of praise and gratitude. People are more willing to open up and to approach you if you seem approachable. And there is nothing more approachable than praise and gratitude. Harmful criticism would be just the opposite of that. You're closing people off with that. Also, self-disclose and connect with people. And we'll talk about self-disclosure in a minute. So, relational dialectics. This describes some of the patterns that occur in relationships as a result of the tensions that take place because of conflicting emotional needs. So dialectics means learning through discussion. So if we're talking about relational dialectics, we're talking about relationships that you are learning about conflicts through these emotional differences between the people who are having the conversation. And I've got some examples here: connectedness and separateness, certainty and uncertainty, openness and closedness. So those are different attitudes. Like someone in an interpersonal setting, one speaker is very connected and the other is very separate, or one person is very positive, the other person is very negative. So this is when we have conflicting emotional needs in conversation. Also, you may hear people say that they're an open book, and then somebody else is very much not an open book. So very different in terms of emotional needs through communication. Self-disclosure. Self-disclosure is when one person tells another person something that they wouldn't say to just anyone else. So it might be that you tell your best friend that you skipped school. You skipped school that day, whatever. It's not something that you would go around telling anyone else, but you can trust your best friend. Or maybe you like a particular person. Hate to go back a few years to, juvenile dating or whatever, but maybe you like someone and you don't disclose that to just anyone. Maybe you just tell your best friend because you can trust that best friend. Self-disclosure is important in interpersonal communications because it creates a bond. It shares cultural information. It also shares sociological information and psychological information in creating this bond. So when you let a person know that you're telling them something that you haven't told just anyone, and that you don't want them to tell anyone either, by sharing that secret, you are really pulling them in closer to create a tighter bond with you. So self-disclosure isn't easy because there could be some problems if you self-disclose and that person that you trust tells it, like fear of having your faults exposed, or fear that your friend, your partner will become your critic if you tell them something bad about yourself. You know, I have this deep, dark secret, whatever that deep, dark secret is, and then maybe you fear that that person would not like you as much or think of you as a friend anymore. Also, this idea that you would lose your individuality from sharing this secret, because then it ties you so tightly to the person that you've told. Then, you know, there's that kind of fear. Also, the fear of being abandoned, which honestly really comes back to the idea that your partner will become your critic, because the fear of being abandoned is directly related to that. If the person that you're talking to becomes your critic, then they could abandon you. You know, that's one of the fears. The thing is, you know, you need to weigh the self-disclosure fears versus the benefits. So in a good relationship, you wouldn't have any fear of self-disclosure, but it takes a while to kind of develop that trust. So maybe you would self-disclose something small initially, kind of as a trial run to make sure you can trust this person that you've welcomed into your life. And then you could kind of work up from there to know that you have built a strong relationship. So what are elements of a good relationship? Now, we're not talking about romantic relationships specifically here. We're talking about friends. We're talking about relatives, just, you know, how to be a good friend. So elements of good relationships include good verbal skills. It's important to be able to talk and to not fear retribution for your conversation. You need to be able to talk openly and honestly. Also, the ability to express emotions is important. It's not just important that you express your emotions, but that the other person allows you to do that when you need to do it. The good relationships also have conversational focus. It's easy to stay on topic with each other, and you can follow the line of thought. Nonverbal analysis is also part of good relationships. Once you get to know someone, once you get to know a friend or your partner, then you kind of start to know if they, you know, tap their foot whenever they're nervous, or if they roll their eyes when they really want to say something that they know will make you mad. I mean, those are things that you can pick up on, and they know yours too. And that becomes a cue to them to let them know, hey, we're pushing too far. And should also be a cue to you as well. Good relationships also encourage conversation. They show caring and appreciation. They also, through that sharing and appreciation, show commitment, and they're easy to adapt as well. So a good relationship continues despite, I don't know, different work schedules or different interests even. I know in my particular case, one of my good friends in college and I decided that we would go through sorority rush together. And we were so excited about it. And we just kind of assumed that we would join the same sorority because we had become best friends in college. And that didn't happen, but we talked about it and said, you know, hey, are we still going to be able to be friends if we're not part of the same group? And why are we friends if we're not part of the same group? And honestly, it was our differences that made us friends. So anyway, elements of good relationships involve all of these things. And it really basically comes down to just being honest when you communicate. The last one I want to mention here is social exchange theory. Social exchange theory suggests that all human relationships are formed using this kind of subjective cost-benefit analysis and a comparison of possible alternatives, and that both individuals in this relationship advance their own self-interest. That makes us as humans sound pretty greedy or needy or both, greedy and needy, that we are going to form a friendship or relationship based on what's in it for us, basically. So it sounds horrible, but let's step it back just a minute. Is it really that horrible? What's in it for me? The friend that I mentioned from college, I met her because I had moved away from all of my hometown friends that I'd known for all my life. And so what was in it for me with that relationship was that I was making a friend that I would have during college, someone that would be there with me that wasn't around my old friends anymore. So that was an obvious benefit for me. For her, she lived in the dorm. I lived off campus at home. One of the benefits for her was getting to come to my house and hang out with my family when she missed her own family. So there were definitely trade-offs in our relationship. I don't think it makes us bad people. And when you read this, it sounds like people are horrible. What's in it for me in this friendship? But really, we all kind of do that. You wouldn't just date anyone. So what's in it for you to date this person or that person instead of a different person? We all look at things that way. So don't let this social exchange theory kind of turn you away from the idea of communications, the idea that people are only in it for themselves. But we do try to better ourselves. And part of that is because of something that we'll talk more about in an upcoming lesson, Maslow's hierarchy of need. People need friendships and people need relationships and a sense of belonging. And the social exchange theory is really just saying that you seek out friends or communication partners because you need to fill a need in your life. And that covers everything we need to know for interpersonal relationships.